All right, I'll break the attendees. I'm in the agenda, and if we get Chad or Stephanie or AJ, I'll circle back and recap some of this. So we've I guess the news of the day, and we can get into that. But to me, Gatwick was overshadowed by our Secretary of Defense resigning today. So I'm sort of dazed by that. To me, it's really bad.
It's getting rough over there in Washington.
Yeah, yeah, it's not pretty. It's not good for the country. And it's to me there is a there are implications for us. You know, when I see things like 238 million posts made by Russians to try to make us more divisive, I just think that as we are a national nonprofit, that we want to really do everything we can to be positive and to be inclusive. I mean, we've put this into the mission, but boy, I just feel this, day by day, more and more strongly that this is important for us. And I saw a lot of good comments about the Gatwick situation and constructive comments like, maybe there's something, when we're formed that we could, simply offer help. You guys, between you two, had some great technical ideas. So I think we can help in situations like this, and I think it will, not just from, not from a self-serving perspective, but truly the essence of a nonprofit to help the public is a good thing, and that's so if we can help in that, it's an aspect of FPVFC that I had not considered at all, which is, we can help in a situation that's we have some absurd drone pilot doing something reckless.
It'd be interesting to see, once we kind of get our feet underneath us and whatnot, if we could create kind of like a critical response team or something like that could, either advise or assist or, something like that to help in situations like this.
Oop, you
Seems like we're over the other voice channel.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, no, and I'm on the road, so I'm gonna mute my mic and probably just listen a lot. But if you want my input, I'm around and I am listening. So
we know where you are. Welcome. Okay, so I like the thought, Josh.
I just think, in situations like that, we can be extremely helpful. And, they're resorting to possibly using snipers and stuff like that. And that's just absolutely unnecessary. I mean, yeah, that's scary.
Yeah, that
wait,
definitely is.
snipers?
Yeah.
What did I miss?
So over in London at Gatwick Airport, there is, over the last basically 24 hours, there's been drone sightings over the airport, as many as, from what I'm reading, 50 different drone sightings. They've shut down the entire airport, 750 flights canceled both out of and into Gatwick. So people are basically stranded for the holidays, and they can't track these drones down. They're saying they're industrial grade drones. Most people are saying they're not Phantoms. They're not, our type of aircraft, but they're flying for, long periods of time, and then they'll disappear, and then they'll come back, and they're just swapping out drones or swapping out batteries, and it's literally, created a international incident over in London.
And if you want to really be scared, watch the House of Lords discussing it and see what their
Like, I
reactions
heard
are.
there's one sighting, but interestingly enough, over the last week, I've been meeting with the FBI, Homeland Security, and a few other three-letter agencies on potential drone detection systems. And we, at least with the group that I'm talking to, there's a general idea that there's a way that can be detected instead of just trying to RF blast them out of the air, and be able to detect the drone with a very it's kind of crazy. When I was talking about the concept, a lot of the people didn't even think about it, but just using simple auditory systems to detect where the drone is in flight. They have these things called boomerangs. Soldiers would wear them, and the boomerang will actually tell you where gunfire is coming from.
Yeah, I've
So
seen those. They've mounted those on Humvees for like snipers and stuff like that.
right. So the system that they're talking about right now is essentially that, but for drones. And the concept being is that you can use such a system to detect where the drones are at the airport and then detect where they're going and landing so you can intercept the operator and stop it at the source. And that's hopefully the new thing they'll start latching onto, because that's, in my opinion, the best way to go about it right now.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Flying silent. Like, they're already dealing with drones flying silent. They're dealing with a lot of interesting things crossing the border. So they're definitely looking at ways to be able to detect and catch the operator, because that's really the biggest thing. These things are essentially now becoming persistent threats to a lot of these agencies, and they're really trying hard to figure out a way to deal with them. So yeah, it's really fucked up. I feel like that airport incident will probably be one of those nails in the coffin for a lot of agencies, them realizing they have to deal with it. It's just a matter of how they're going to deal with the problem.
This is a profanity-free zone. I'm serious.
Wait, what did I say? No, F word.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Good. Good thoughts. Good discussion. And so, as we were talking, Zoe, this is a situation where we might offer assistance in an emergency situation that involves drones. And this certainly was not in my mind before today. And I think it's certainly central to our purpose as a nonprofit, which is explicitly to help the public. So that's fantastic. And I like Josh's notion of, we could potentially set up a critical response team. There's also the notion that PR is also important. That would help, hopefully help mitigate some of the sensational journalism that always will pop up after an incident like this. Okay, good thoughts. Any other thoughts, or in response to a drone or drones flying over Gatwick?
I think the one thing is, Dan and I had some good ideas that you'd mentioned earlier. We need to figure out some way to explore something like that, because that's something we could go to the FAA with and say, hey, instead of requiring new technology, why don't we use the existing technology to basically allow law enforcement to, kind of like Zoe's working on the boomerang, but with us it would be simpler, just a ID broadcast that says, hey, I'm a drone, or I'm a model aircraft, here I am, and be able to track it easier.
Yeah, Zoe, if I caught the essence of what Dan and Josh were talking about earlier today, it's on one of the general posts. The idea of embedding identification in the VTX transmission, in as much as there is metadata that's going along with the signal that we could.
Yeah, no, that data should actually be your ham operator code, and that should already be something that's done, but it's not done. Every pilot should basically, if they're operating above SCC or their local limits, that have and should have a ham operating license, like that should be something that is in everyone's FPV feed, which automatically is identification.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest thing though is like we're gonna have a lot of pushback
I agree.
if we end up trying to say, hey, pilots, try to add a transmitter to your drone,
Right.
because that's
Yeah,
not
this
what.
is. I completely agree, and I think that the amount of pushback on this topic is going to be significant, and I think it's also absolutely one of the three central tenets that the FAA has been on ever since this past July when they presented to the aviation subcommittee in the House. So,
And I also agree, Zoe, with what you were saying. The thought that I had was that in the specs for NTSC and PAL, you can add closed captioning information, so a little bit of text. And in there, we could put our license ID, you could put in your FAA registration ID, you could put in your pilot ID, you could put in all kinds of cool text information and then use that in all sorts of different interesting ways, whether it's displayed on your OSD or somewhere else. Just
Cool.
an interesting thought I had.
I think it's a great idea. I'm just personally against identification of my hobby drones, even if it adds 0 weight. I mean, we have people flying in gliders and ultralights that don't have to add identification to full-scale aircraft. I'm flying a little tiny whoop. Adding that kind, just like self-imposing it on ourselves and then self-imposing it on pilots that are going to be operating under the CBO, it's going to be a tough
My
sell.
recommendation is that it would be totally optional, as it could be useful in other ways, but it would be a totally optional sort of thing if the hardware had it built in.
I think on the flip side though, if you think about it this way, Zoe, is that if we self-regulate to a lesser, I mean, the proposal that I had thought of and that Dan kind of thought of as well, and kind of go hand in hand, is a lot lesser than adding a transponder on, you know, and we all know the FAA is looking for identification of some kind. I mean, it's in the regulations, but if we do it to a lesser degree, is that going to be more acceptable than, you know, what's on the table already?
And we also know anyone who's trying to do anything illegal or nefarious is not going to do either of these things, so it really wouldn't stop anything.
Well, that's what I'm saying is that I guess the biggest thing is we're having an issue where pilots don't even want to comply with the AMA. So we kind of have to, and this is, again, one of the other issues I have is that initially we're talking about adding things like, hey, you can fly without a spotter, having things where we have less requirements on the pilots that fly under us, but not adding more to it. Because even though it's a great idea, it's something I believe should be talked about and promoted as the right alternative. Like if you're going to ID these drones, this is the solution that the FPC or FPVFC recommends. I think that's great. But we have to be really careful because there's going to be a lot of pilots. When they even hear us talking about identification, they're going to instantly just start thinking that we're pro the FAA / we want you to identify your drones, and we risk potentially turning away the pilots that we want flying under us.
we are pro FAA. That's a pretty important central point. And I mean, this is a really good discussion and really critical. And to me, you know, if we look at the you know, the EAA as an organization that has worked with the FAA as opposed to trying to combat the FAA as AMA has, you know, I think we stand a better chance of continuing to preserve, you know, our privilege of flying in non-designated areas.
That privilege right now, though, from my understanding, is essentially built into the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2018. Even like they cannot dictate to us where they want us to fly, they can just dictate the airspace, which, I mean, we're not going to be flying up in restricted airspace. There's only going to be certain areas that are actually going to be restricted, and those are already restricted to other aircraft. So, I mean, it's I guess the biggest thing is, yes, we should be pro FAA, but we have to realize that the majority of pilots feel a bit taken back by the way the FAA is implementing the new rules. I mean, we should be pro pilot first. FAA is who we work with to make it better for the pilots. I mean, there's a certain, give and take, yeah. And one of the biggest issues with the AMA this last time around was the FAA was essentially pushing through the Reauthorization Act underhandedly in a lot of ways. And the AMA at the time politically lost their shit. Like, they weren't ready for what happened. So they had no way we had no way of putting our foot in the door to do anything before the Reauthorization Act went through. So now we're just basically playing catch up / backboard. Like, the FAA in a lot of ways has won in the pilots' minds, and now we're structuring ourselves under the FAA, potentially now talking about, transmitters and transponders and adding more regulations.
We're not adding more regulations, Zoe. The regulations are there. It just has to be basically discussed. And I think the point I'm trying to make is we need to be able to work with the FAA and mitigate some of those to a lower level to gain back freedoms that could potentially be taken away with stuff like transponders. And that's just an example, but if we can mitigate it to a lower level to keep it pro pilot, I think it behooves us to attempt that, because it's either that or we're going to end up with whatever their scenario is going to be. And if we can mitigate that to a lower level, I think it'll be better for everybody. So
Yeah,
I mean, it's
that's a really pragmatic point of view. I think you're right too. Then I guess the question then becomes is, how do we explain that to the pilot? How do we tell the average person that just wants to fly their drone that that is the current situation and that that's the best course of action?
That's a good point, because the immediate reaction is going to be negative to that.
Right. So that's what, I guess, what I'm saying. Because, like, I understand the need for it. You understand the need. We all understand the need for it. It's that knee-jerk reaction from the pilot. Like, we've got to be able to frame it in a way that they're going to want to be supported of, versus them just knee-jerk reaction. Like, okay, so this organization is pro-IDing, which to them be like, fuck that. Like, sorry, F that, frack that. Sorry about that.
I think
I use the F word as an all-inclusive thing, so I will try really hard to avoid it.
Yeah, the English language is a beautiful language and has so many words, and you're a super bright person, so
I think
you don't have to rely on the crutch of profanity.
Well, that's the thing, is I guess I never really see the F word as profanity, but like just a general word you can put into place that has different meanings depending on context.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very versatile word. It's probably the most versatile word in the English language, and that's please.
I think honestly, if I came to you and you were anti-ID and I said, look, if your transmitter has a required your transmitter and your VTX has a required signal built into its its data stream, its data cycle that transmits that, hey, you're a drone. It doesn't transmit your location. It just says, hey, I'm a drone or I'm a model aircraft. And by doing so wins you the trust of the public, law enforcement, and the people that are around you. It gains some trust back from the public after incidents like this. And I think that that right there, being able to fly without having to look over your shoulder all the time, I think is a win-win scenario. So
that really is, because I mean, if you sell it that way, if we sell it that way as a proposal, as it's not something requiring of members, but something we're proposing to the FAA as the best possible solution to that requirement, and explain that to them in very simple, like literally 3 paragraphs. If it's longer than 3 paragraphs, it's going to go over their head. And if we can do that, I think people will support it. And I think that's something that needs to be done, because you're right. If we have that identification, you can say, yeah, I'm identified. If in the future, when cops have systems to be able to identify the systems, you won't have to potentially deal with the issues that come up from being an unidentified aircraft. So I totally see the need for it. I understand where the FAA is going with it, but the biggest issue for us is dealing with that knee-jerk reaction from the community and trying to soften the blow as much as possible. But yeah, yeah.
Good, really good discussion. Thank you, everyone, and thanks for no one getting defensive. I really appreciate that as well.
We all know it's a safe zone.
But I can't say my favorite word.
That's correct. Okay. If I may, further discussion on that, or I'm proposing to move on to the next topic in the agenda, which is far less interesting and it is really mundane, but it's where we're trying to go. Other discussion on this?
You bet.
Okay.
How effective is this going to be for, it's going to have to apply to manned aviation too, and we have quite a few aircraft out there with no electrical systems whatsoever. They're hand propped, magneto driven for ignition, and they don't have the capability of transmitting their position. And they're perfectly legal to fly through a large swath of airspace here in the United States. I flew from Detroit to New Orleans at low altitude, and I think I had maybe 2 conversations with air traffic control over that 2-day period. The most of us flying with our quads are going to be in areas that we're going to be out of signal line of sight from any sort of receiver. So UTM would only work for us, unmanned traffic management, remote ID, if you will, would only work with an airborne receiver or if we were flying in a high traffic environment.
I think, I mean, as far as remote ID and the transponders that has been talked about in the past, I think the proposal that Dan and I are coming up with is basically your VTX would transmit a identification signal. Basically, it's not unique to your aircraft. It's every system that had that receiver plugged into it would transmit the same identification, basically just saying this is a model aircraft. And it's not up to other, it's not for, I guess in my mind, it wouldn't be for other airplanes to identify it. It would be more so that law enforcement, in case of an incident, could use a specialized piece of equipment that's designed to read that signal and locate that signal. So both your transmitter, your handheld controller would broadcast it, and your VTX on your drone would broadcast it. And basically they could find the drone, they could find the operator, and they could shut down the operator safely without having to use, these snipers or net guns or signal jammers or any of this other anti-drone technology. It would, to go back to Zoe's case, it would be more like that boomerang, being able to locate both the drone and the operator within a very short time span, and go to that operator and shut down the operation. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes perfectly sense. And for me, I would be in favor of that for my equipment. But the bad guys, like I think Dan mentioned it, are not going to use that. They'll find some way around it.
Well, and the thought I had was, this would have to be put into the authorization, making it a legal regulation, and then you have to go to the manufacturers, and this is the difficult part in saying, in order to sell these transmitters in the United States, it has to have this firmware on it, and if anything is tampered with on that specific piece of firmware, it bricks the receiver, making it ineligible for operation.
Yeah, I don't see a problem with that. Matter of fact, I think the manufacturers are going to end up with this kind of requirement anyway with the new regulations once we get everything in place.
And this is the biggest thing too, and the thing that I've realized over the last week. The remote ID and the requirements for the drones is not necessarily to say, oh, hey, you're a drone, you're good. It's to root out who are the bad operators. Because there's a lot of drones entering into the airspace, and a lot of these airports that are adding systems to detect them are actually picking them up. And the idea is to be able to identify them and to be able to verify, like, okay, that is a known operator who's flying legally, who has their information on the drone. It's a drone that we shouldn't have to worry about. So the ones that are picked up on a non-verified, they can actually investigate properly and figure out what the frack. I hope the fracking is okay.
Okay, and that's also a good aspect. If I'm a good guy out there flying in the farm field or whatever, and the law enforcement's looking for one of the bad guys, at least they won't come rolling up on me. They'll be targeting the unknown that they did identify.
AJ dropped out. Can everyone else hear, or am I the only one who's?
No, I think he dropped out.
Okay. Yeah,
I was just about to say this to you, just to be funny, but this is not a funny meeting. This is serious.
Yeah, and you're being recorded.
Fine.
Serious. Yeah. So this is being this is being posted up on YouTube. So, and we'll have minutes. In the I'm taking notes. There's an agenda, and so.
I know Zoe's aware of the meetings, as she posted one of these on her last live chat.
Oh dear.
Yeah. No, I'm more than aware of them.
Okay. No,
I was trying to
know.
promote the fact that they're there.
Right. No, promote just the notion of it's a positive thing to to be thoughtful about what we're saying. Is all. Don't need to beat. I'm not trying to beat it to death. So.
That's the thing. I can be thoughtful about what I'm saying without having to self-police what I'm saying, because I care. I'm not trying to, like, I guess, direct what I'm saying to say the right thing, because I care about the thing that I'm actually fighting for, and I don't really feel like I need to filter. So you get what you get.
Okay. All right. Good thoughts. I don't want to. Okay for the group to move on if AJ's able to. Oh, I see him now, but I don't see that he's been able to get back in on the.
He's doing a headset change.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think we can move on. We can discuss this after the meeting if we still want to kind of hammer some ideas out.
Okay. All right. So 501c3 process. As I was describing before we started up, I've gotten agreed to changes on the Articles of Incorporation and the bylaws. The latest versions of both are in the folder where you found the agenda, or the link in our core general, or our core discussion channel on Discord. I've been reading a lot, continue to read a lot about the 1023 easy instructions, which is the IRS submission for 503C. And filled it out. I only had a couple open questions. I've sent those off to our attorney, Andrew White, and I will push through those. Glancing down to the schedule, the next steps are we need an employer ID number. The attorneys will take care of that. We need the Articles of Incorporation submitted to the Secretary of State of Virginia. Our attorney will do that. Once we have the employer identification number and a date of incorporation in the state of Virginia, then we can submit the 1023 easy to the IRS. I also need to follow up with Chad for an email address of all the board of directors, because that's one of the things that needs to be filled out in the 1023 easy. questions on that? I think we're getting closer. End of January is my my target to have us approved as a 501c3.
I think that sounds great. I think that's sooner than I was expecting, for sure. I was expecting a months long process once we submitted. So
yeah, there is an interesting aspect of the submitting the easy versus the full 1023. It shortens the process, halves the submission cost, and if we determine sometime in the first 3 years that, oops, we're larger than we anticipated, then we can simply submit the full form, update our authorization, and there's no problem. There's no issue, and if it happens that it's after the 3 years, then it's still not a problem. So this was like, yeah, so we want to do this quicker, and there's no penalty. Done. So that's the course we're on. All right. Launch. I think we. I just tuned some of these thoughts from the last week's call. The launch that we have as the FPVFC launch, understanding that Zoe is driving, and I'm hoping she's not looking at any computer monitor, is that at launch we want to be able to have the website that we've gone through a number of times with a resource list. We need to ensure that the member sign up is functioning, ensure the volunteer sign up is functioning. We want to have merchandising. We're going to utilize Teespring as our e-commerce platform. We'll put out a press release. That's easy. And we will create an internal 30, 60, 90-day action plan that says this is what we want to get done in 30 days, 60, 90 days subsequent to the end of January launch. Some of the things that we're talking about now are contacting the FAA with a request to be a community-based organization. In addition, we want to pursue identifying multiple contacts in the FAA, and also working through the various steps of integration that are in the FAA's 5-year plan, as well as the activities that are discussed in the 2018 Reauthorization Act for the FAA. Thoughts or reactions on any of that?
no, I think it's all perfect. I'll start working on putting a 30, 60, 90-day plan together, and as well as the points of collaboration that we can kind of start hitting
Awesome.
go.
Awesome. Thank you.
And I did read a post earlier today that the DAC is accepting new members, and I think I recall you saying that we submitted Chad's name for that.
Yes, good memory. And interestingly, we got a memo from the fellow whose name is in that posting, Chris Ham, and said, "Hey, if you want to submit your a name, please do so." And I'm like, didn't we do that? But okay, it was really gracious of him to alert us. So I will reread the what the requirements are, and we will probably resubmit the same, and maybe we'll comply with whatever the additional information is needed, and we'll get Chad's name in there again. So yeah,
awesome.
that's yep. So we should yeah, not sure that's required here, but yeah, that's on my own to-do list for tomorrow, in fact. Status of actions and ideas from last week. We talked about the notion of an elevator pitch. That is, if someone were to ask one of us, so what does this FPVFC do? We should be able to answer that question in 30 seconds and with a coherent answer. And the idea is that we want it to be consistent from any of us who may be answering that question to influencers or press or FAA or anyone we're interested in collaborating with. And so this is just basic driving a consistent message 101. Let's see. Through here, new thought of value. Zoe, we also had a thought last week that one of the other aspects of the FPVFC that may be of value to the community is to be an objective third party for standards. And so if it's something as simple as a standard connector between a flight controller or a VTX, or if it's working with companies like Betaflight to request that they keep constant standard their system programming interface so that companies like Helios Spring RC can continue to create innovative and proprietary technology that has exits and entries into hardware and firmware. And so I think there was an agreement that the fact that we should have some good level of objectivity in comparison to one manufacturer or another should help us. And we'll also on the board we'll have multiple vendors represented. So in my experience, that helps keep everyone honest or more honest. Because we'll all be watching each other, and that's beneficial to customers and public.
But that's a huge undertaking. Like that's an undertaking to an organization all its own.
Yeah, I know.
We can do it.
I do. I mean, having been at the center of a couple multi-company consortiums and standards bodies, I fully appreciate the difficulty and the complexity of it.
So I guess the big thing is, do we have a champion right now to like champion / push that?
Not yet. Not yet. I think it's a one. This is the important aspect of the 30, 60, 90-day action plan from a perspective of, it's highly bureaucratic, but what I'm focusing on right now is get us approved as a 501c3. And it has virtually nothing to do with going outside and flying drones, but it has everything to do with trying to get us recognized as a community-based organization. So in the 30, 60, 90 days, it's like, okay, there's our priorities of things that we want to, we will do, and here's the priority of them. So practicality comes to play.
Well, I guess that's what I'm worried about, is the practicality of it, because I mean, this is my outside point of view, being more of a person that's been looking in the last few weeks. I honestly feel like our division of effort and time and energy is going to become extremely divided if we don't have a champion and people to follow the champion to kind of push that cause. Because if you pair that with the Wiki project, pair that with the CBO project, pair that now with the transponder, project, and the fact that we're not even a solidified group yet, at least legally, I'm just curious if I guess like a concern more than curious if we're pushing / kind of running ourselves a bit thin as far as resources and the ability to accomplish these goals. Yeah, that's my concern.
What I'm trying to make sure we're doing is brainstorming good ideas, and so I do want I do recognize that we are a volunteer group, and most of the people on the phone, not me, have day jobs, and can only dedicate a finite amount of time to this effort. So I take your point. Yet I do think it's really important to try to dream a little bit. It's really okay to, to think, well, how could this help? How could an organization like this, if not this month, if not next month, next year, if we can gain critical mass, what would be a way to make this more effective to the community? I guess that's all.
Well, I think it's definitely needed. Like, first and foremost, we need a standards organization. It's an organization that's trying to push standards. The real thing I see for that, I guess, is we need to find someone that can be more of a dedicated, a very objectionable person, someone that's not sponsored by or has a relationship with these companies.
An objectionable person? No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, well, kind of, because, like, I mean, I know most of the people within the
you mean an objective person, and I was teasing and twisting the word.
Yeah, objective person, someone that doesn't have an unbiased person, someone that doesn't have, like, I'm with Helios, I work with several groups, and even though I don't have signed contracts / there's no cash moving between hands, there's still a bias, and I feel like in order to get manufacturers on board with the idea, we have to have a champion for it that's going to be able to be unbiased and give an objective view and idea and basically a goal for how the standard should be approached and implemented. Because I'm sure manufacturers are going to want to fight for what they think is best, but that's just going to be what probably works for them / they can push their own standard. And I think if we can find that person, if we have that person in the volunteer list, that would be the right person for that job, or at least to volunteer to head that and champion the cause, because it's definitely a cause that's needed to be championed, and it's one that I believe the FPVFC should champion. And it's kind of desperately needed, because without standards, we have all these different companies creating things that don't work with each other, and now we have the experience for the newbie getting into it being absolutely horrible. So
right, yeah. Without standards, we don't see market scaling as quickly as we could, and in addition to frustration and fragmented and disparate components that don't work together. Absolutely. I
know how catty some of these groups can be, and how just trying to get, for example, Immersion RC and Team Black Sheep to work together. I mean, if we do that, I guess that would be my first goal. If we could bring in literally counters, Immersion RC and TBS under the same flag, then there's a possibility we could really push that, and we could really help the industry out with standards.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the trick. We would have to have the unbiased, objective person that can be objectionable and objective to these other companies, and actually kind of be a peacekeeper of sorts versus just I don't know, trying to make the connections, because I feel like that's what's really needed. We haven't had the round table of manufacturers that get together and agree on what the heck they're going to be working on that year. We don't have that. It's desperately needed. So I agree it's needed. I'm just very curious how we can move forward and find the volunteer resources to properly push that.
Yep, I agree. And assuming none of us here right now has the time to be that big champion to get this going, hopefully we can use this idea to attract a person or a couple of people to join us and really jump behind this. Maybe somebody out there really thinks, yeah, I would love to work on that, and we can get them in here.
That's my hope. That's my hope, because I know I would love to champion it, but I don't feel like I'm the right champion for that cause. I know the right person is going to be out there. There's going to be a person, an engineer, that's just sitting around completely upset that there's no standards, and be like, you know what? I know how to help. And that person's definitely out there. It's just a matter of being able to get that person on board with this idea and be able to make that connection. So it might behoove us maybe to put out a little ad, we're looking for you, and have like the positions that we need desperately as like 3 things, that being one of them. And then send that out to the volunteers that we already have on the list, seeing if any of those people meet that match, and then even promote that on the internet a little bit to see if we can find that person. And that does 2 things. One, allows us to find the person, but 2, it also signals to the community. So either way, I think it's a good thing.
Good. Okay. On to the next step was marketing, and so under that we had the FAA relationship, which we mentioned a little earlier. We also have an FPVFC Facebook group. Stephanie and Josh have been active there as we progress. To me, it's important that those of us in the core team are visible there, and not making it a life's work, or that we should not be beholden to signing on, but we should be, each of us should try to be active, and again, consistent messages. Let's see, Stephanie's been working on the merchandising, scrolling down. We don't anticipate a lot of activity this week or next, in as much as the artists, Stephanie asked them to submit artwork as of this past Monday. I've not heard from her on that, so I have a hunch that due to the holidays, that's probably going to slide a week. I think that's okay. We're able to make the end of January with enough merchandise that is simply logo merchandise, so that we'll have something.
We also have a backup plan. Stephanie and I, we have an idea that I kind of came up with, and I think we discussed it earlier with we're calling them the stickies, and we're gonna get that kind of squared away as kind of a backup in case we don't have any additional artwork submitted. So I'm going to be working on that. Her and I are going to be working on that. So we'll have a little bit of a backup artwork plan. So
awesome. Thank you. Zoe, if you have not seen Josh's style guide, it's a best practices. I'm sorry, say again.
We actually we have a style guide that makes me so happy.
Yeah, I created one.
It's and it's having worked with style guides for decades. This is a best practice piece of work. So this.
Right
thank
on.
you. Yeah, thank you, Josh.
Yeah, seriously, thank you. I love the fact we have a style guide that's going to make everything pop. Our message and brand will carry much further because of it. So right on. Thank you so much for that work.
No problem.
Okay, and under the website, I still owe Dan some more colorful words around how Chad got into the hobby, and thank you, Dan, for updating my bio and pic. We had let's see. I'm not sure if Dan is on. I don't see it. It looks like we might have lost his signal.
I'm still here.
Excellent. The wonders of Discord. Who knows what is? You said you had mentioned, Dan, that you're going to try to edit the FPVFC logo with the wiki.
I made the logo, put some words on it, and yeah. Oh, and we just lost Zoe, as far as I can see.
I think
right
you're
when
right.
I was gonna.
Yep. There she's
and
back.
then she's back. Was right when I was about to ask Zoe if remind her that we sent her some logos for the drone wiki that she could work on when she has a chance.
Yeah, that I should have a chance. I'm gonna be taking a week off from life and work, which will probably mean me working on this. And then from then on, and for the next month or so, I should be pretty much stationary in 29 Palms, just chilling / working on projects. So I should have more time to dedicate to this going forward, thankfully.
Great. We're happy that you're employed, and we're all hopeful that physically it's a better situation.
So on the FAQs, I dropped a link in the core group. That is done. If you guys want to just click on that real quick and give it a quick once over. I did break them up into sections with quick links to the sections in there. So that is done and ready to go.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay, I will look at that. Good. All right. You want to take a look at that now, Josh, or?
Yeah, we
let's
sure
see.
can. If you just click that link I dropped in the core group
Ooh,
general.
Look at that.
So it's broken up into FPV regulations, where can I fly, registration and education requirements, community-based organizations, general questions, and law enforcement and the public. You click on any one of those, it drops you down to that section. So
I love this. This is yeah. This is really data chunked. So I mean, it's like, yep, got it. Thank you. This is really well organized.
So good to go.
Nice. Okay, now let's see if I can get back to my. There it is. Back to my agenda. Google Suite is up and running. Okay, I think I'm gaining a mild appreciation of what the various groups folders are. It looks like it's a collaborative pushing of emails, as well as it allows us to set up links. So it looks like we should be using the suite in conjunction with Google Drive. Josh, is that your take on how this thing works? So I can say, oh,
Yeah.
look, we're working on this, and I can send out, and it'll send out an alert, and then I can, oh, look at that, and it'll have a link out to a Google Drive document that we can then collaborate on.
Absolutely. So I think that's the between that and Flow, because you can pop links into Flow as well. So I think they can all kind of work in conjunction without being interconnected, I guess. But I think a good chunk of it's going to be like the volunteer, being able to focus the volunteers onto specific tasks, and then Flow would be more for us and what we're working on, kind of thing, if that's how you're kind of thinking too.
It is. Yep. Yeah. I'm trying to figure out how can I give you guys access to a specific project in a Flow account that I have. Have you plumbed Flow enough to figure that out?
Honestly, I haven't, but I've got I'm switching to a new position at work, which will allow me to kind of dig in a little deeper here. So I'll be working earlier, getting off earlier, and a consistent schedule instead of my random chaos that I've got going on now. So
nice. When does that start?
as soon as somebody else vacates the position.
Hopefully soon, my friend. It's brutal having your schedule ratcheted around.
Yeah.
All right. Well, good. Okay. Well, let's see. So are you guys purchasing right now? You're purchasing your own license, your own accounts, right? $5 or $10 a month, whatever it is.
Yeah, it's $5 a month for Flow. I know Stephanie and I are on it. I don't know if Dan or anybody else have kind of jumped in on that, but
and my objective is to get us reimbursed for productivity tools. All right. Okay. I think that's all I had on the agenda.
Wow, you're really good at having these things last almost exactly an hour.
Yeah.
Even with the unpredictable beginning of this one.
Yeah, it's like so I sold structural analysis software for 2 years, and I would always come up behind the guys who were selling CATIA, this surface modeling, this incredibly, sexy stuff, and then there was me. Oh yeah, we left 5 minutes for Messina to talk about structural analysis. So yeah, watching the clock and working it has been an important attribute. Okay, other comments, questions? we should talk about next time we're together. We are definitely not getting together next Wednesday. We're going to take Christmas off.
Excellent.
And so that means that next time we're together should be, okay, that would make it 2/2, yes? January 2nd.
Yep.
And I will, I'll continue to use Discord to the core group to provide updates and if I have any questions. And as I've said, the everything, I'm not sure if I did mention it, but I think, yeah, I did put links out there. I filled in all of the information for the 1023 easy form, put it into a document and posted that up on the FPVFC folder. So in case you wanted to see it, plus there's the form. And so this is simply in an effort to be completely transparent. And I welcome any comments or suggestions.
Awesome. I'll take a look at it.
Yeah, cool. Anything else?
I think I'm good.
All right, then I would simply ask everyone to have a happy and healthy holiday and a happy new year and be safe. And thank you again for all the amazing work that you're all putting into this. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All
Thank
right.
you for putting this together. Thank you everybody for the hard work. Sorry I've been very MIA lately. I appreciate everything you're all doing. Like hearing the work that's been going on in the background makes me really proud to be associated with such a group of people that truly believe and have their. That's really, really, really cool. So thank you all for doing what.
Thank you,
have an amazing
Zoe.
holiday. And,
Thank you. That's nicely said. Thank you very much.
Well said, and thank you.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
You too. Take care.
Merry
Signing
Christmas
off.
and good night.
Signing off. Take care.